So it begins. It would seem as though next gen is coming sooner rather than later, at the very least for Xbox, with Microsoft having officially teased the codename of the next generation Xbox. It's currently titled Project Helix, and it's a pretty small tease, but a tease nonetheless. It's an official, kind of nudge that next generation Xbox is something that Microsoft is pushing for pretty heavily. This is the trailer that they released for it. So yeah, not a whole lot. It's a name that does, however, kind of give you hints as to what to expect from the console. Here's Ashish Sharma's statement on Project Helix, quote, "Great start to the morning with Team Xbox, where we talked about our commitment to the return of Xbox, including Project Helix, the codename for our next-generation console. Project Helix will lead in performance and play your Xbox and PC games. Looking forward to chatting about this more with partners and studios at my first GDC next week." So it seems as though aspects of this next-generation console, that's going to be a console-PC hybrid, will be showcased to developers in order to prime them to start getting ready for the release of this machine in the hopes that they can get as much developer support as possible. Now, the name Project Helix already kind of tells you what this machine is all about. The fact that it is a helix with two kind of elements intersecting with each other, it very much symbolizes the crossover between console and PC. And we've already seen hints of that with the Xbox Ally handheld, which very much kind of showcases what the next-gen Xbox is going for, as stated by Sarah Bond when she worked at the company, where she said that the Xbox Ally does provide a look into what they're pushing for with the future of Xbox. And what the Xbox Ally does is that at its core, it's basically a Windows PC. But on top of that is this Xbox overlay, this Xbox full screen experience, as it's called, that aims to provide something, a user interface that is really accessible via your classic controller inputs. But the issue with the Xbox Ally is that ultimately it's still running on Windows, whereas something like the Steam Deck and the Steam Machine will have an operating system that is dedicated to ensuring you can get to your games as quickly as possible with as little friction as possible. Windows is still ultimately just bloated with all of the various functionalities that it was meant to serve. It's not just a gaming device, it's also a PC. And also, Copilot is something that Microsoft is trying to shove into Windows, despite many users complaining about not only the fact that it just doesn't work particularly well, but people don't want Copilot to be at the forefront of their Windows experience. Copilot, for those who don't know, being the AI feature that Microsoft is trying to implement into Windows to make it an agentic OS where you can just issue commands to the AI and they will do the tasks for you and find information for you. But so far, that's proven to be a very unreliable technology. And then on top of that, with Ashish Sharma being like a Microsoft AI executive before she became head of Xbox, there are concerns as to how much Microsoft intends to lean on AI for Xbox. In fact, recently we've already seen patents of an AI-powered Xbox helper system that basically plays games for you when you're in a difficult segment. They're making it so that you don't have to look at guides, and instead the AI will just kind of do it for you. But a lot of people have qualms with that because it almost defeats the purpose of gaming, the overcoming of challenges, the fact that you're not doing it yourself, but you're letting AI just kind of take over for you, foregoing all semblances of overcoming challenges. And gaming being such an active experience, having a feature that turns it passive just seems counterintuitive to the medium itself. And so there's still questions as to how the Xbox Project Helix version of this operating system will look like, but it will require a lot of fine-tuning and refinement and slimming down and making sure that it is optimized for gaming and not just be like a Windows machine with all the friction points that come with Windows, such as the various updates and restarts and setting up that you have to do. That was a big friction point for the Xbox Ally. If they can ship the device in as clean of a state and as ready to go of a state as possible, where it's just plug and play and you don't have to mess around with too much stuff, then we could be looking at something, but there's not a whole lot of confidence on that front, and that's something that Xbox has to work really hard on. Windows Central itself highlights in their report how Project Helix will essentially be a gaming PC with the Xbox full screen experience from the Xbox Ally handheld at its front end, and Microsoft is apparently working around the clock to make the Xbox full screen experience for PC feel as close to a polished console experience as possible. But really, only time will tell. And at the end of the day, the fact that Windows is still the foundation of this operating system makes this all very disconcerting. It's not like a version of Windows specifically tailored for gaming. This is just straight up a PC. Now, the article here talks about how this will be the most open Xbox ever, how you'll be able to boot up the Windows desktop if you want from here, install other PC stores such as Steam, Epic Games, GOG, Riot Client, Battle.net, and much more, and play all of those on this new Xbox. In theory, you'll also be able to install Adobe Premiere, Steam Labs, and other content creation tools, and just any software that really runs on Windows 11. But presenting this as like, oh my gosh, this console will allow you to do everything, is just another way of basically saying that what they're ultimately shipping is just a PC. We have to dispel the notion that Xbox is breaking new ground unless they show features that break new ground in this hybridization of consoles and PCs, because so far it's just sounding like they're shipping a PC with a front end. And one thing that I'm concerned about is the price point of this machine, because of the fact that it can no longer be subsidized as much as the Xbox could, because once upon a time Xbox followed a traditional console model where they would ship exclusives for that console and be the software sales, the exclusive sales that would subsidize the cost of the hardware. It allowed them to kind of decrease the price point of the Xbox console. But now with this basically being a PC and it being able to play every game that is in any PC storefront, I have to wonder whether this is a machine that they can subsidize. And if not, given that they're pursuing a very different model from traditional consoles, how much will this machine cost, especially with the ongoing shortage and inflation of RAM and SSDs and GPUs and you name it? Now, one advantage that Project Helix as a PC can have over other PCs is the fact that every unit of Helix that is shipped will all have basically the exact same specs. Maybe there will be multiple SKUs, some that have more, like storage space than others, or some that are more powerful than others in the way that Xbox Series X and Xbox Series S did, but it's not going to be a whole lot of variety. With traditional style gaming PCs, specs kind of range across a wide spectrum. But with this Project Helix, even though shipping games on Project Helix will basically be shipping a game for PC, they can optimize the games to run as best as possible on the very specific specs of Project Helix. So it'll be PC games that will maybe potentially have like a Helix setting. In the same way that when Steam Deck launched, because that is still one spec that everyone got to utilize for those who purchased Steam Deck, and it got popular enough that a lot of people adopted it, developers started coming out with things like a Steam Deck like setting preset for their games. So the potential for better optimization, because Project Helix is going to be a gaming PC with one set of specs, or just a handful at most, again akin to Series X and Series S. It may very well be that Helix will pave the road for really optimized PC gaming. But at the same time, no doubt Helix will not be the most powerful gaming PC either. It will be fairly powerful, judging by the way Ashish Sharma says here that Project Helix will lead in performance. It'll likely be more powerful than the Steam machine, though also likely significantly more expensive. But for it to have mass appeal, it can't go above a certain price point, and it still cannot be the most powerful device, because making it the most powerful device would make it like exorbitantly expensive. And so for the hardcore PC gamers, they're still probably going to stick with, the latest and greatest in terms of GPU, CPU, and, all the customization that can be enacted with your own custom PC. Customizations that will suit the level of powerhouse that a lot of PC gamers tend to pursue. But yeah, the message here is clear. Microsoft wants to make Xbox as accessible as possible. They want the next-gen Xbox to be as open as possible, make it the one-stop device for all of gaming, including PC games, and they want to ship their Xbox games to as many platforms as possible. They're no longer doing the traditional console-exclusive model. And I don't particularly know how good of a model this will really be, because at the end of the day, you can still play Xbox games on any platform. Like Halo is still coming to PlayStation 5 and whatnot. So at the end of the day, you don't necessarily have to purchase this Project Helix Xbox device to be able to play Xbox games. And that's ultimately where the folly of this strategy lies. Now, Ashish Sharma has promised before that one of her 3 commitments is the return of Xbox. So I don't know if there are plans for Microsoft to kind of go back to more exclusive releases. But even then, Xbox as a brand has lost just a lot of its power and its definition, because of how kind of spread shot everything has been, especially with the campaign of like everything's an Xbox. This is an Xbox, which is one of the things that basically got Sarah Bond fired, or at least not promoted to head of Xbox over Asha Sharma. And now shipping an Xbox console that isn't really a console, that's just a PC, an experience that you can have without having to rely on Xbox and still be able to play Xbox games on top of PlayStation games that are launching or have been launched on PC, on top of, games that are released or just PC. I still don't see how all of this paves the road to this Project Helix being something that will significantly boost Xbox as a brand, given the current strategy and landscape of things when it comes to Xbox. The one thing I will say is that if they manage to make Project Helix just a really accessible way to play PC games and to game or the Windows friction stuff, they manage to somehow remove and eliminate and just make it a very intuitive user experience that even people who are casual gamers can just easily dive in, then maybe the potential here is to make PC gaming a lot more accessible and less complicated and, having to deal with less, and you can just press a button and it'll turn on and you're already into your games. You don't have to worry about what PC components to buy. You don't have to worry about building it. You don't have to worry about which pre-builts to go for. If they make this the one PC that if you get, it'll work right out of the box and you don't have to worry about anything, then that has potential if they pull that off. If they can make an experience like that even casuals can just easily navigate through, then maybe that's the selling point of something like this. But because Windows has such a poor track record of having that level of accessibility and that level of intuitiveness, it's not something that I'd hold my breath for until I see it with my own eyes. Now, something worth noting is that Xbox's more open approach to their next-gen console, making it just a PC that can kind of play anything a PC can, might be the reason why Sony recently apparently made the decision to pull back from PlayStation games on PC. This is according to Jason Schreier, investigative reporter, who apparently heard from the grapevine that PlayStation won't be releasing games like Ghost of Yotei on PC anymore. They're still going to release your multiplayer games like Marathon and Tokon and live services that are developed in partnership with PlayStation or are made by Sony and PlayStation on PC. But when it comes to those powerhouse releases for PlayStation, especially where your first-party single-player experiences are concerned, those are all apparently from here on out, with the current state of things, with the current plans, no longer going to release on PC and truly be fully exclusive to PlayStation 5, because Sony feel like releasing these exclusives on PC debilitated PlayStation as a brand. And then on top of that, with Xbox moving towards this PC console hybrid kind of format, that also means that if PlayStation keeps launching their games on PC, Xbox can promote themselves as basically releasing the device that can play all games, Xbox games, PC games, and PlayStation games. And so there's speculation that a part of why Sony pulled out was because they don't want to give Xbox the ability to promote their machine as something that can play PlayStation games. They're completely different approaches, literally complete polar opposites. PlayStation sticking to traditional console model and kind of going back to even more exclusivity instead of allowing their games to release on PC, whereas Xbox is saying we want to ship a machine where you can play Xbox games and everything else that comes out on PC. But with that comes the risk of kind of diluting what Xbox really even is. And so I'll be curious to see if they plan to do things with Project Helix that will make it more than just a gaming PC with more defined specs, or if it'll ultimately just be a PC that, there's not a whole lot of reason to choose the Xbox over other PCs out there if you're a hardcore enthusiast, or even the Steam Machine, based on what the price point of that will be in comparison to Project Helix, and the Steam Machine being kind of a more favored option, and the fact that that's competition for Project Helix as well, might mean that Project Helix won't be able to stand out, or won't be able to really have a mass level of appeal, won't be able to reach a price point that makes sense. There are all of these factors that are still unknowns, but could define whether Project Helix will have relevance in the gaming landscape. I think enthusiasts and hardcore fans of Xbox and gaming will look at Project Helix with a lot of interest, but for the rest of the masses who are looking for a plug-and-play gaming experience, your average Joes, if you will, I'm curious as to whether Windows as an operating system, the complexities that come with that, will ultimately get in the way of this platform being something that garners mass appeal. But yeah, just a lot to think about in terms of what Project Helix is and whether its goals will be able to be realized in a successful way. But I suppose only time will tell how all of these plans will shape together into a cohesive strategy. In the meantime, though, I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on this Project Helix Teased, the fact that it will play both Xbox console games and PC games, and what do you think that Project Helix needs to do in order for it to be a success that can rival the likes of, your PlayStations and your Steam machines and your Nintendos, and to be a more relevant aspect to gaming than Xbox has been in recent years? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.